Please welcome Representative Steve King of Iowa's 4th Congressional District.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for the welcome here and the chance to be here at the conference. Been a little while since I've been to Denver. And the conservatism that flows out here across these tables or something, I want to listen to all the rest of the speeches today too and leave as late as I can, possibly tonight. But I've been assigned this privilege to address the immigration issue. And I thought, I don't very often dig back into history and see how we got to where we are. And I think it's pretty important to do that. So I look back and I thought, what do I remember? Well, let's see. I remember that Dwight Eisenhower did enforce our borders and did enforce our immigration laws. And in about 1954, he started a program because we had a lot of illegals in America. I was paying attention then because, let's see. I was raised in a law enforcement family. My father was a manager of state police radio stations. I grew up around uniformed law enforcement officers. He was also a manager of a small town in north central Iowa. And the town cop, his name was Henry Nolte, arrested an illegal alien in town one day. 250 people in this little town, so I'll give you the scene, cornfields in all directions. And so that's how we lived. And we brought this fella in who was from Mexico and illegally there. And so my father was also the justice of the peace. We didn't have a lot of people, so you had to wear a number of different hats. But they held court there in the tiny little city hall, which was just an office off of one of the buildings, and decided, you're in this country illegally, so we're going to deport you back to your home country, back to Mexico. And so Dad picked up the phone and he called the Highway Patrol, where he has constantly communicated with them all of his work days, and said, send a car and pick this guy up and shuttle him back home again. And so they headed south with him in a patrol car, and wherever those district lines are, their patrol area, they stopped and shifted him over and shuttled him south. Now, I don't know if he ever made it back to Mexico, but I know this. I got a lesson on how you respect for the rule of law and what you do when you find out that people are breaking the law. You put them back in the condition they were in before they broke the law. And then, so getting back to Eisenhower, he was carrying out the same thing, only where there was one out of my little town, there were 1 million in the first year he started the program that voluntarily returned back to, most all of them back to Mexico. 500,000 out of Texas altogether, 1954. And they deported 250,000 a year at least throughout the period of the 50s when Eisenhower was president and that program was rolling along. And so I thought, well, let me see. How many Border Patrol agents did they have in 1954? Here's a number, right about 800. 250,000 deportations, 1 million went back home voluntarily, 800 Border Patrol agents. Today, we have 21,000 Border Patrol agents, and we're deported in 2017, 226,000. So we're getting about the same kind of production out of 26 times more Border Patrol agents. Now, why is it we can't put some efficiency into this? We've been at it a while, and I think it's because too many people don't want to really bring a result and enforce the rule of law. My ideal world is in America, everybody that's here is legal. And if you're illegal, you have to go back home. There's no other way to address this with justice and equity. Each succeeding president after Eisenhower enforced immigration law less and less and less and less. And when we got to George W. Bush, he looked at the election results in his 2000 election for the counties in South Texas. They all went Democrat, which is heavy Hispanic, and Karl Rove decided we better make sure that we change our policy. And it was on January 7th, 2004 that George W. Bush gave his first amnesty speech. And I recall that because I sent a letter to them, and I got a call from Karl Rove, and we had a 35-minute discussion that day. And he is saying to me, well, is it amnesty if they pay a fine, if they learn English, if they get an education? You've heard the whole drill. And I said, sure it is. Now let me define amnesty. Amnesty is a pardon for immigration law breakers. It's a pardon. And in this country, it's coupled with the reward of the objective of their crime. They get to stay. If they came to live in the shadows, we're even dragging them out of the shadows and saying, here, we're going to make you a citizen. Too many Republicans are taking that position. I recall in 2005, in this immigration debate that we had that flowed from George Bush's initiative, they bust in tens of thousands to fill up the west lawn of the United States Capitol. And they put matching T-shirts on them. It was a sea of white out there. And then Teddy Kennedy kind of walked out there to speak to all of them before the podium. He had an interpreter. But he said this, and I'll never forget it because it was a clarion call. He said, "Some say, report to be deported. I say, report to become an American citizen." That was the message to illegal aliens in America and to those who wanted to come into America and came after that. Democrats are going to pass you down the line of citizenship. And Hillary Clinton ran for president, telling all of us everybody should be a citizen unless they're a violent criminal. So we've seen what happened on the other side, but I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly on our side. And President Trump is President Trump because he stood his ground on immigration. And he said to me one day, and it actually was in the Oval Office in this conversation, he was telling 4 or 5 other members of Congress around that circle, he said, "I raised more money for Steve King than anybody else ever did." And I'm grateful for that. I appreciate it. And I said, "Yes, but Mr. President, I market tested your immigration policy for 14 years, and that ought to be worth something." and so on we go. Border. To secure the border, we are spending today $6.67 million a mile to secure our southern border. 21,000 Border Patrol agents, about 5,800 ICE agents, not many of them down by the border, however. But we track that. We're the only ones I know that figure this out. So I'm thinking, let me see if Kirsten Nielsen would come to me and say, "Hey, Steve, you know that west mile from your house, that gravel road, we're going to pay you $6.7 million each year to protect that mile, and you can get 25% efficiency there, and it's a 10-year contract, so a $67 million contract. If they were going to hand me $67 million for that mile, I can bet you there wouldn't be anything get across that mile for that kind of money." And on top of that, I wouldn't go out and hire a bunch more labor. I would build a wall, and it would be solid, it'd be strong. And then I'd put a little wire on top of that wall, and I'd put a little deterrent current in there. Because after all, they're not supposed to be there, and that saves money, and it's efficient and effective. So then they say to me, no, on that border, across that border comes 80 to 90% of the illegal drugs that are consumed in America. 80 to 90%. And that's out of the director of the Drug Enforcement Agencies under oath here just a couple of weeks ago. 80 to 90%. We lost 64,000 Americans due to drug overdoses last year, and at least 2/3 of the opioids are illegal coming into America. The opium crop acres in Mexico tripled between 2013 and 2016. So you know the drug cartels are ramping this up, and they're pushing heroin into America, and they're lacing it with fentanyl, and that's such a killer dose that nobody wants to get close to that. So we are the market here for maybe $60 billion worth of illegal drugs, and a lot of that money gets laundered and sent back down south. We're bringing people into this country, and I think there's some things that we're not remembering very well, and that is this, that the young people that are coming into America often are prime gang age recruitment young men. I'm the one who actually has my hands on the data for DACA now. Out of 2 million application forms, 14 million pieces of paper, from last September until about 2 weeks ago, I was digging into USCIS to get that information. I finally had to take 4 of my staff and me over there to have a big conference to get this resolved. So I've got a better look at who DACA is than anybody else. I haven't published much of it yet because I want to make sure I've scoured it thoroughly. But the typical DACA recipient is a 3-year-old girl that was carried across the Rio Grande by her mother, they tell me. And looking at the data, it's clear that is true. Some of them are that. But also, there are about 135,000 out of the 817,000 that are prime gang age recruitment. And if they expand DACA out to 18, from 16 to 18, you can add another 66,000. So you've got 200,000 young people right in the heart of prime gang age recruitment coming into America, dropping them into ethnic enclaves where MS-13 is as powerful as they are anywhere in the world. And we think somehow we're getting kids out of a dangerous country, putting them into a safer place. As this debate went on in the Judiciary Committee, then Chairman or Ranking Member John Conyers from Detroit was sitting there when they're telling us, we have to get these kids out of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and places like that, bring them to America because it's too dangerous for them. And I said, well, we'd better not take them to Detroit then, because, or New Orleans, or Baltimore, or Chicago, or a good number of other cities. But here is what's going on. Here's some other data that nobody's looking at. And that is, I wrote this down because it's fresh and it changes pretty regularly. So it's this, that there's ratings out there of the most violent death ratios in the countries in the world. And today, I just checked this morning, 9 of the top 10 most dangerous countries with the highest violent death rate are south of the Rio Grande River. 9 of the top 10, and in fact 10 of the top 11 are south of the Rio Grande River, and one of them is not Mexico. Mexico is 19th. And Mexico used to have 3 times the violent death rate of the United States. Now it's up a little more than that. They have 19 violent deaths per 100,000. We have 5.5 violent deaths per 100,000. So we're bringing in young people. A lot of times they're coming across the border with a pack of marijuana on their back. I've been down there to pick them up. I've seen the videos on top of it. I've walked through the desert. I've covered nearly every mile of that southern border by air or land or on foot. And I sit down and ride with the Border Patrol agents. So I've got a pretty good feel. I've sat down on that border at night. San Miguel's Crossing, some of you'll know it, down in Arizona, the most dangerous crossing. No night vision for me, just sit and listen. And I hear them coming through the fence, 4 barbed wires that, it takes a pretty tame cow to be restrained by that. And they're coming into America and they're hauling drugs in, and the drug cartels, not only do they control the border crossings and control who comes through into America illegally, I mean, they're smuggling people, there's sex trafficking going on, but they also, the Mexican drug cartels, control the distribution of the illegal drugs almost everywhere in America. And I asked the director of the Drug Enforcement Agency, under oath again, what would happen if everybody in America woke up, or everybody that was illegally in America woke up in their home country tomorrow morning, magically woke up in their home country, what would happen to the illegal drug distribution chains in America? And he said, it would stop them all, because at least one link in every illegal drug distribution chain is an illegal. And many of them, every link is illegal. So we have to solve this drug problem. We have to solve this problem of violence in America. We're exacerbating it rather than solving it. And that means we have to secure the border, build a wall. I say build a wall at least as tall as they have at the Vatican. And by the way, when the Cardinal tells me that I shouldn't be for English as the official language, I remind him that the official language of the Vatican is Latin and Italian. So I think English needs to be the official language of the United States of America. We need to push assimilation. Push assimilation, build the wall, shut off the jobs magnet. Now we have E-Verify. That just got taken out of the House bill, by the way, so they don't intend to bring E-Verify. I have a better bill even than that. It's called the New IDEA Act. And the acronym IDEA stands for the Illegal Deduction Elimination Act. And what it says is that wages and benefits paid to illegals are not tax deductible for federal income tax reasons. And under a normal audit, the IRS would run the employees through E-Verify. If they are verified, then the employer gets safe harbor. But if they're not, the employer will see that money that he had deducted, say you pay $1 million in wages, all of a sudden that's denied as a business expense. It goes over into the gross receipts, shows up as net income, and you pay interest and penalty and taxes on that money. Now that's the way to weaponize the IRS, not the way Lois Lerner did it. We do it this way. and, and end sanctuary cities, and pass Kate's law, and pass Sarah's law, and restore the respect for the rule of law in America. That's the center of this. And so when Ronald Reagan signed the Amnesty Act in '86, it's one of only 2 times that he let me down. I revere that man, but I believed he would he would veto the Amnesty Act because he would have known what it did to the rule of law. And he signed it instead, and I kicked a dent in my filing cabinet that day. I was standing in my construction office, I heard it on the radio, wham, and that dent was in there for years. You always had to jerk that drawer open to remind me, rule of law. We lost a whole bunch of it then, and I knew we'd be years restoring this respect for the rule of law, and I've been working on this for 32 years myself. We're on the cusp of doing that. So I'd just leave you with this image, and because I criticized Ronald Reagan's decision, not the man of the decision, I want to give you a little bit of a Reagan image, but I want to modify it to match to mine. It is this, that when Reagan spoke of a shining city on a hill, that always stood in my imagination as the way he described it. A beautiful picture, a word picture, but a beautiful picture, a shining city on a hill. But I describe America a little bit differently. We are a shining city that's built upon the pillars of American exceptionalism. Sitting on these pillars, and think of them all around in a circle around the perimeter of this shining city. Freedom of speech, religion, the press, assembly, the right to keep and bear arms, property rights, no double jeopardy, jury of your peers, then a number of others that are pillars of exceptionalism, and that is free enterprise capitalism that gives us a vigorous and robust economy. Judeo-Christian values, Western civilization values that you heard Frank talk about, each one of those has their own pillar that this shining city sits upon, but the central pillar is the rule of law. And if we take it away by granting amnesty of any kind, DACA amnesty, we will not live to ever see it restored again. And I will work to fight off any kind of amnesty that they try to bring and do all things within morals and ethics to preserve and protect the rule of law so we can be a shining city on the pillars of American exceptionalism. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.